Here we go. Zoom is setting up our live stream on YouTube.
I said okay.
Fantastic. And does look like we are live successfully. Let me double check the second technology. Maybe one day I will shift and actually join the masses that are something with a duck.
Ah,
Um, that you can apparently do all of the streams to and through and join the masses that are. Hey, look at that. It's working.
huzzah!
I love it when it works. All right. Hello. Welcome, whether you are tuning in live or watching the replay. My name is Kate Mura, she, key pronouns, and I am ridiculously excited to be chatting with my longtime friend Anna Urosovic about her new book, Slava, Dual Faith. And I'm totally missing part of your second tagline.
Slavic paganism and dual faith folkways is the subtitle of Slava.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I finished reading it a few days ago, and Anna and I have known each other since
Pre-social media for sure.
way pre-social
Way
media.
before.
If I remember correctly, I met you for the first time at Imbolc 1998 with Moonbeat's Earth Song Sanctuary back in the day.
Before that, actually, I came to check out, courtesy of the free Chicago paper that sadly does not exist anymore, called the Monthly Aspectarian, when it would host community events on its calendar. It was summer solstice of 97 when I decided to go to the Irish American Heritage Center. I was not formally introduced to you at that time. Matthew and Teresa are drumming and welcoming people, but I remember you by your hair. And you were just grooving and in your awesome clothes and just having a freewheeling good time. So I first came to check out the group that summer solstice and then put it on the back shelf and was kind of trying to put my feelers out there for other active Chicago magical and pagan groups that I may want to affiliate myself with. I came out of the broom closet to my parents in 1992. And for many years, just enjoyed my solitary practices of devotional polytheism and homespun witchcraft, a lot of which wound its way into Slava's pages. But then, towards the late 90s, I was like, I'm yearning for fellowship. I know I'm not the only weird person in this with alternative spiritual proclivities. Let me go.
Indeed.
I've got the mind to connect with my tribe. And that's when I started putting feelers out there to find other tribes folk to gather in spiritual fellowship with.
I feel like if you are certain it was the summer solstice, I feel like it must have then been the summer solstice of 98, because 97 is when I moved to Chicago proper, and I thought that you were at my very first Moonbeat's Earth Song ritual, but maybe it was actually it must have been a couple months afterwards, because my very first ritual in Chicago was the autumn equinox 1997 with the OTO lodge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just so happened to run in, I just so happened to meet one of them at Celtic Fest. Does Celtic Fest, like all of the free festivals in Grant Park, do those still happen?
Some do. Celtic Fest does not, but there is a privately run Irish Fest at the Irish American Heritage Center, but that's them doing it in their own facility, so it's not the way that it used to be in the park anymore. No.
Gotcha. Um, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Those were
That
really
building,
lovely.
that building was where Moonbeats used
Yeah,
to meet. That was where we had
yeah,
our really transformative winter solstice 1999. That was the largest attended urban public pagan event that we had the honor of participating in under Matthew and Teresa's amazing leadership and choir direction and choreography skills. And it was just
yeah,
it was a real intensely involved production.
yep,
And that was, speaking for myself, a real kind of um, initiation into here's how we successfully do group dynamics for a wide audience. And it wasn't performative theater, it was intensely tapping into these currents. I remember I played the Lord of Misrule, and my
yes,
pronouns are she, they, by the way. So I played the
yes,
Lord of Misrule for that winter solstice, and that understanding of liminality, of formlessness, of fluidity, really, I felt I was downloading something cosmically, and that
yes.
experience stayed with me for long after that solstice ritual ended. So that
Mm,
was such a powerful time for all of us. And we were so young, but we were really so wise,
yeah,
for being so young. And I think we really did great work for the Chicago community. That's my take on it.
I completely agree with you. I'm so grateful that all of that ritual building and community building happened happened for me in my late teens and early 20s because it gave me such a solid magical foundation, unlike different from your Serbian upbringing. Like, and I'm not sure if this is just a family difference thing, if this is a Polish Serbian difference thing. Like, but my Polish side of the family, which is all of my paternal line, were of the if we do not, when someone dies, we do not talk about them. Like
Oh,
there were no ancestral altars. Like
oh,
you, when they were gone, they were gone. You didn't want to talk about them and bring back their ghost sort of
oh, okay.
feel. Um,
Were you
and
Catholic? Can I ask you, were you
Catholic.
raised Catholic? Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
raised Roman Catholic, very, very much a New Jersey
Mhm,
Polish of interesting silences.
mhm,
And so my spiritual background was Roman Catholic, and then I left. And then I had my own searchings for a bit, fell into Scott Cunningham
mm.
work. And when I got to Chicago, I, like you, was also looking for greater pagan community and found Moonbeats Earth Song Sanctuary. And it was such a powerful, magical foundation
Mhm.
that has that has served that has served so beautifully over the decades and put me in touch with such marvelous people. And yeah, like you, I am so grateful. I'm curious, weaving your book
Mhm.
in the I was really moved by your prologue and introduction and allowing the reader to go with you on that journey, a small bit of your journey of not wanting to do all of the Serbian things and really then coming to embrace that ancestral
Yes.
legacy and that spiritual path. And
Hmm.
I'm curious about how the greater, or if the greater Chicago pagan community was, how, like, if they were part, like if they were on the same road with each other for you, or if it was more like parallel roads or something else.
Yeah. Uh, that's a great question. And I will start by saying that so many people, when they come under the big pagan umbrella, have a variety of reasons for doing so. So many people come because they have had, sadly, very traumatic Christian upbringings or Abrahamic faith upbringings.
Yeah.
And I was not one of those people, so I didn't enter into polytheistic paganism with like a deep seething hatred,
Mhm.
for the faith that I was raised in. And paradoxically, as a child, it all started with me being curious and asking questions because I
Mhm.
was very aware, so self aware of the otherness that was being heaped upon me by virtue of the fact that I am a child of immigrants. We don't
Mhm.
speak English in the home. My last name, Urosovic, is something impossible for non Slavic people to pronounce, let alone spell. Um,
Mhm.
and I felt this mantle of otherness on me. And as a child, I don't know if this is the case with all children, but I really wanted to fit in. Like, oh, why couldn't we have been Irish like my Catholic classmates or my Filipino classmates who would snicker and go, why is your Christmas on January 6th? Like, we all know that's not when Jesus was born. And I wanted to like shrink into a hole in the floor, like I hated having that scrutiny kind of placed
Oh.
upon me as this immigrant kid. And um, so over time, definitely by the time I was 9, because I am raised in the Chicago Catholic school system, we've got the
Mhm.
Bible study, we're doing this, that, and the other. We're doing, actually, to their credit, we did a lot of comparative religious study too, but then it
That's
always
awesome.
came back to, well, we're better. Like, okay, those people
They exist,
they
but.
exist and this is what they believe and here's what Buddhists believe, but theologically they're wrong and we're right. So I would have this real immersion into all things religious and spiritual. And then I would come home and reflect and see the practices my parents, and when my mother's mother lived with us in the early 80s, she had
Mhm.
such a profound influence on my spiritual development because of her piety, but also her
Mhm.
paganism and her folk magic. So I'm astutely observing Nana around the house. But to get back to your question, I started by the time I was 9 asking my parents questions. Well, why is our Christmas Eve on January 6th? And more
Mhm.
intriguingly, because my little pagan antennas were pretty well starting to form at that time, I felt
Yeah.
a kinship with the trees. I felt a kinship with the moon, definitely with animals as conscious avatars of spirit beings. And so I'm asking, well, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why do we have oak branches? We're collecting oak branches that are blessed during Christmas Eve service. And instinctively, as a child, I'm like, this has nothing to do with the birth of Jesus Christ. And of course it doesn't. And I write about the winter solstice pagan traditions in my book, Slava. But
Yes.
as I'm asking, and I'm even asking during Mass, like during Christmas Eve Mass, like, why do we do this? And my mom is elbowing me and saying, Idius mi tvoj badnjak, like, get up there and go get the branch of oak. It's called a badnjak. And then I would say, but mom, why? What is the why of all of this? And she's going, this is what we do. This is who we are. And I'm sorry that you're not currently appreciating this, but be thankful that you're not like those Americans who are completely driftless. They're not anchored in anything. They don't have their own languages that they're connected to anymore, almost like they're soulless. So be glad that you have these traditions that root you in your specific cultural identity. And someday, you will really reflect on what I'm saying and you will treasure your roots. And so it was through open-ended curiosity, peeling back the onion layers of Christian influence during these sacred days in the year. The why are we doing this? And who's really, if it's not Jesus Christ, and of course it's
Mhm.
not, that's the being honored at this time of year, then who is it? And so on my own, okay, I can have access to books better in Serbian from Serbia than what's available at the time on Slavic mythology in English. So
Mhm.
I'm going through my parents' books of mythology and anthropology, and I'm, a pretty astute little kid doing this
Yeah.
on my own initiative while I'm doing my studies at my regular school in English in Chicago. And it just started forming like my own collective set of family informed, mythologically informed. I'm going to develop my own system of practices to be done in alignment with these sacred days, days of power, as my Nana
Mhm.
called them.
Mhm.
And then when I started discovering pagan things, I was hoping to find, but of course, everything was so new at the time, even in the city's development, something with concurrent beliefs like, okay, it's not going to be specifically Slavic in terms of its cultural expression,
Mhm.
but I bet I can find other people who recognize the winter solstice as a day of power. I bet I can
Mhm.
find other people, who see the earth as a mother like I do, and in
Mhm.
their own language and in their own way at Easter time or whenever, we're awakening gently the power of Earth Mother, and we're showing our love for her, and we're going to be committed in our daily lives with ecologically informed habits so that we're not further hurting the planet but helping her. So it
Yeah.
became a force of parallel development, because then I would go to my altars at home and I have, my specific Slavic track of practices. But then I really want that fellowship with my
Sure.
American pagan friends. And then, as you
Mhm.
know, I eventually wound up, Samhain 1999. Richie, my best friend, who
Mhm.
you also know, and we
Yep.
all know each other because of Moonbeats.
Mhm.
When I met him in the summer of 1999, then by Samhain of that year, I was invited, kind of like with Freemasonry, you had to know who to ask because
Yep.
this Gardnerian coven was very closed, the Temple of
Yep.
the Sacred Stones. And then when I found that, something clicked like, okay, Eastern Orthodoxy is a very ceremonial Christian denomination. It's the incense, it's the liturgical chanting, it's solemn, but it's beautiful. There is a rhythm to how ritual actions are performed and the timing of when they're performed and the symbolic gestures of addressing cardinal directions. So all of that stayed with me. And when I saw that Samhain of 1999 ritual that I was a guest at for Samhain, it clicked and I said, there's something strangely familiar to me about all of this. And now Gardnerian Wicca is aligned with that love of ceremonialism that Eastern Orthodoxy imprinted upon me. But I was still doing my family things as like a third subset of practices. So the onion, perfect Slavic vegetable. We love our onions.
Yeah.
So here's
Oh.
part of my family stuff. Then here is the more closely knit, but outside of my family, Temple of the Sacred Stones, Gardnerian Wiccan Coven. But then outside of that is just informal networking and fellowship and breezing around with everybody at Moonbeats.
Mhm.
Or I tried attending public rituals by Temple of the Four Winds, also in the late 90s. I
Oh,
had mixed
right.
experiences with them.
They
So
did one of
it
the
leads
pagan
to
pride
fellowship.
big rituals, didn't they?
I don't remember. I don't remember, but I remember when we were doing rituals at that beach in Evanston by Northwestern's Lighthouse,
Yes.
that beautiful space. Moonbeast leased it for a time. I went to one ritual, I think it was a new moon, Esbat, that Temple of the Four Winds did. But I'm like, I'm not really clicking with these people. No disrespect to them.
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, Anna, stop it. You've got your Gardnerian group for the pagan things, for that formal ceremonial stuff you love so much. but then I'm still doing, and I'm keeping to myself because I have no one to share this with, my home domestic cultists based on Serbian culture and my own explorations into Slavic mythology and weaving together my own little tradition out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hearing you talk about Circle of the Sacred Stones, I I was honored to attend one or two of their
I
rituals,
remember. Yes.
and and hearing you talk about that, I'm like, I don't actually know how Donna and I met, and I wonder if you introduced us.
And it was through Dana that I was introduced to Donna. Yeah, Donna really liked Richie and me.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
it took a while. I didn't know that she was very ill, like at the time that I joined, that I was initiated. So I didn't know until, as you know, then I moved to Hawaii in the early
Oh,
2000s in 2003. And I remember I don't like disappointing my elders, whether it was my parents or a family member or a teacher. You know, Serbian culture is all about filial piety. Like the student, the child has to very much defer to their elders. And
mm,
so when she told me, Donna Cole Schultz, I say your name that you may live, how profoundly disappointed she was that I was going to Oahu for 4 years, because that's where the military was sending first my fiance, then my husband. And I was very like, but we'll be back. 4 years is going to breeze by like you don't know. And I didn't know she was speaking from a place of she was fighting her colon cancer. I didn't know that that's what was afflicting her at the time. But she, was certain that it would be kind of the end. And she revealed to me, even though I'm just first degree at the time, excuse me, she revealed to me she already in her mind had handpicked me to succeed her. And I'm like, but you have third degree, coven mates of mine. Like, why are they not candidates? Like, I was immensely flattered, but I was also really shocked. Like, why me though? And she's just like, Anna, oh, this is a big mistake. This is a big mistake. You're making a big mistake. You really need to reconsider leaving Chicago. And I'm like, I feel like the die is cast. Like there's no
going back.
reconsidering this. Just like the Navy literally picked up everything from my Jefferson Park apartment to ship it to Honolulu. Like it's all gone. And I said goodbye to her at the spring equinox 2003 ritual. And then I had my little Aloha going away party right after that. But I did come back Samhain of '03, and that was the last time I saw her alive. And she died in 2004. So that sense of, well, Robert's still around. When I moved back to Illinois in 2006, I'm like, Robert's still around. He can elevate me, to the final degree, and then I can fulfill Donna's wish of taking over the coven. And the day that I called him and said, Robert Schultz, I say your name that you may live. Hey, let's talk about this. And he said, do you know what I'm doing right now, Anna? And I said, no. And he goes, I'm literally burning the coven's book of shadows in our home fireplace as I'm speaking to you. And I was on the Kennedy Expressway when I was calling him in 2006, announcing I've just moved back. This is like my top order of business is reconnecting with all of you. And I know that Donna's passed away, but the coven's going to enter a new phase of energy and expression. And he said, I'm literally burning it. And I'm so shocked. I am literally like veering into other lanes of traffic. I'm so shocked. I want to pull over. And he goes, Anna, without Donna, there's no point to any of this anymore. For a coven that had run 35 plus years, like the longest running Chicago magico spiritual organization. And I don't know if Pisces folk are that spontaneous. He was a Pisces. I just don't think that would be such a decision to do it just seemed so glib. Like he was just so glib about it. Like very Buddhist, like, this was impermanent from the beginning, and I'm just acknowledging how impermanent it is. And I'm like, no, like this deserved better. And, who am I to speak out of place? But when that happened, for the longest time, um, I felt, there's the Japanese term of a samurai who loses his master and is wandering the earth, just like whatever, like this is nothing matters. There's an Anglo-Saxon poem called The Seafarer, where and The
Oh,
Wanderer,
yes.
those poems, where
Yes.
the speaker is also kind of like reminiscing about the beautiful days with his lord in the mead hall, and all of his comrades in arms were still alive at the time, but now he's walking across these desolate landscapes, and everything just screams volumes of loss and ruin. And those poems strangely affected me. They were just so elegiac and heartbreaking when I read them as an undergraduate. But then in 2006, when Robert revealed he just disbanded the coven willy-nilly, I had those poems just rush into my soul. And I'm like, now I feel like that Ronin, that samurai with no overlord to guide him and to serve as a mentor anymore. And I just felt lost. And so it's like,
Mm.
okay, now we're going to fully retreat back into what we've been doing all along, our little private domestic cult practices of my obscure little Slavic gods and my ongoing ancestor reverence. And, now I have ancestors of spirit, not just ancestors of my blood and my literal kin, but Donna, and then eventually Robert, and my priestesses in the Fellowship of Isis, Dina Buta, Dina Buta, Lorianne Vignay in California, who ordained me in 2012. Like they're all now part of my mighty dead. They
Yeah.
shaped the traditions that I had the pleasure of joining. But the throbbing heart carrying me through everything has been what I outline in my book. And that's, again, coming back full circle to what my mother said when I was a little girl of someday, Anna, my God, someday you're going to treasure your roots. You're really
Yes.
going to appreciate your roots, so it really all
Yeah.
comes full circle to that.
And I'm so glad that you did. When I was a child growing up, unbeknownst to everybody, I also spoke Polish fluently until I was 5 because my great grandmother, who I called Babci,
Mhm.
even though she was my great grandmother, because my dad called her Babci because
It's his
she
grandmother.
was his Babci, and I, imitated my dad, of course. And she lived in the apartment above my grandparents, and so I would see them every week, if not more, when my parents were going into the city and seeing shows and things like that. And nobody, gave any thought to me running back and forth between the two homes, of course. And nobody also gave any thought to the fact that Bobchi only spoke Polish.
Mhm.
She learned to understand English, but she never spoke it.
Mhm.
And which is a fascinating dichotomy to the other side of the family, where I remember hearing at, random family functions, we are in America, we speak English, we don't speak Polish anymore, we are in America. And, these two polar opposites are
Yeah.
existing in my family. And after my Bobchi passed, my parents asked me if I wanted to continue with Polish. My dad spoke a little, but not a lot. But there was a Polish school that, did classes of an evening. And if I wanted, I could go to that. And, remember I'm 5 at the
Mhm.
time. And I said, no, I'd rather do Girl Scouts.
Aw.
And my parents, to their credit, listened to me and said, okay. And I was in Girl Scouts all the way through to Adult Scouts because I wanted to be. But I lost that connection to Polish and to any like any folk memories or traditions that may have come from my babci. Like I don't know whether or not she really was a very devout Catholic and had been for a very, very long time, or if there were any folk pagan practices or not. Um, one of my patrons asked a question. Um, Arwen says that she has a concept of weaving as being part of Slavic paganism. Yes, no, why?
Absolutely. When we talk about symbolic encoding, even centuries after Christianization, the textile arts are across Slavic cultures, across ethnic identities. Yes, there is specifically on a magical track, there's a lot of cord magic that's done
Mhm.
as like a premier Slavic witchy wisdom way of women, and this isn't exclusively female phenomenon. It is gendered. The binary gender of women are doing these textile arts. They're doing it domestically in the home, especially in more rural settings. And it's the provenance of postmenopausal women. So I'm looking forward, I'm not that far away, to having that kind of immersion into reclaiming that ancestral power. And
Mm,
strangely, witches are mostly born, but they can also be made if their family members are themselves born with the red shirt that's serving a maitza. That's being born with a call. Actually, it was
mm,
my father who was born with a call. Digressing, but that's a
mm,
womanly art, the witching, weaving the goddesses of fate, the Rojenice. Mother
mm,
Mokosh, our earth mother, they are depicted as weavers. They have carded wool and
mm,
spindles in their iconography, which get transferred to the Christian Saint Petka Paraskeva, Saint Friday, Friday being the day of the week of these goddesses. So there
mm,
is that seamless transition, and that's where the dual faith comes into play of
mm,
the goddess is the weaver, and the saint now is a protectress of women, and she's a weaver. So yes, there are tons of taboos governing. I know from Serbian culture, a woman must avoid weaving, embroidery, all of it, knitting, crocheting. Don't do any of the fiber arts on a Friday. You don't want to make Sveta Paraskeva, the saint, angry, but that's an earlier folk memory of not wanting to make the goddess Mokosh angry. So yes, when I talked about the symbolic encoding, there is a book, the title of which escapes me, but when I come across it, I can recommend it, and follow up in a comment on social media or whatever,
yeah,
where the author, it's an anthropological book, she painstakingly goes throughout Eastern European Slavic countries and documents, here's the textile arts preserving this intensely feminine pagan imagery of the goddess Mokosha in her various forms, with her arms upraised,
mm,
flanked by sacred animals like firebirds or horses,
mm,
with the wheat sprouting at her feet. So to this day, whether it's very conscious on the part of the women who are weaving these highly symbolic forms, whether they're consciously aware that they're preserving these goddesses or not. I say that they are.
uh-huh,
Yes, the act of weaving is so fraught in a multiplicity of ways, whether again it's simple basic cord magic or these beautifully woven textiles that preserve the ancient goddess iconography. Weaving is absolutely a part of Slavic folk magic, yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Your answer made me think of two things. One, a welcome to those who are joining us live. If you have any questions to ask Anna about her book Slava, please type them in the chat and we will weave them into the conversation. And what You mentioned in talking about weaving how it is a gendered activity. And one of the things that I was definitely curious about when I was reading Slava was um, the gender binary that came up on multiple occasions. And you and I are both queer. You and I both use differently gendered pronouns. How or are there ways for the like what are the gender fluid, what are the gender neutral ways in when there are tasks or gods or beliefs that historically historically have been attributed to one gender or another?
So all religions adapt to meet the needs of the people, otherwise they become extinct.
Yeah.
So I think as queer people going forward, we're carrying the mantle of these traditions and we're making them part and parcel of where we live. So as a Slavic woman born of immigrant parents, in North America, I'm keeping these traditions alive as best as I can. I don't have descendants after me. As you and I have talked about, we're in
Right.
that precarious position of the last unicorn, our families
Yep.
die out with us. And
Yep.
so that's part of my, I felt my father and my brother really compelling me, their spirits, to get this out there because this is going to be like my child, to
Mhm.
continue the legacy out in the world after I'm gone. So as queer people, we're rooted in, again, that mantle of otherness that I talked about when I was a child, finding solace and comfort and strength in this position of liminality, because what is the other world? Every culture on earth has some concept of what the other world is. It's a portal to where magic enters our world of the living. It's our gateway to our beloved dead. So as witches, we are intimately at home with these liminal currents. As queer
Mhm.
witches, we're also liminally, meandering and navigating identities in a world that may or may not accept us or understand us. So we're adapting these traditions, we're stamping them with our identity, but in, you know, Eastern European countries, and I'll speak for Serbia, things are changing now. The country had its first openly lesbian prime minister, just a couple of years ago.
That's
But
awesome. I had no idea.
yeah, there's still a lot of conservative mindset of like, well, men do this and women do this. So generationally, people are conditioned to think, well, this is women's work, working with the textile arts, doing this, but witchcraft is also women's work. But then we can go among the East Slavs and we can see, yes, there are male magical practitioners. I'm not saying there aren't male magical practitioners in the South Slavs and the Balkans. There are people known as dragon men. They work with serpent energy that's tied to the god Veles. And then if we look at like Ukrainian, Belarusian, Russian folk magic, there are classes of male identified spirit workers. And that's like the boys' way of dealing with navigating these witchcraft currents. It's like having a magical specialty. Oh, you're
Mhm.
going to go to the Znakar for this, but you know what? You're going to go to the equivalent of the cunning woman for this. So it's like a specialized trade of magicians. And strangely, I read about in doing my research for the book in Moscow as late as I want to say either the late 80s or the early 90s, like right after the Soviet Union dissolved in the early 90s, there was
Mhm.
a Moscow male practitioner of magic, um, advocating politically to reestablish like the unions that existed to protect male magic workers. And this was like a guild tradition that was operative in the Middle Ages. And he was advocating to have that reinstated and nationally recognized. I would be really curious to know how that movement did or did not bear fruit, with the current
Mm.
climate. So there's degrees of specialty that do appear to be based on gender norms and dynamics, but now, those of us who are carrying the mantle of these traditions forward to keep them alive as living, breathing spiritual traditions, we're going to mold them in the image of our queerness. That's just going to happen. It's just
Yeah.
going to.
So, what advice would you give? Because I know I have a ton of genderqueer friends and non-binary friends, and I also have a ton of people that really want to be respectful within their curiosity and within their spiritual paths. And I can imagine that if I only identified with he, kin pronouns, with they, them pronouns, that if I was looking at weaving, that I might have a tentativeness or a fear because I'm like, well, I'm drawn to weaving because of X, Y, and Z, but I don't identify as female.
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations for those folk of how to approach the art or how to approach that spirit or that divine? Because so often, as you and I know, the conversation and the work is in the relationship that you build with that spirit or that entity. But I also definitely know folk for whom that if they see a gender binary, they put a wall up for, whatever reasons. And do you have any recommendations of um, how to begin that conversation, especially if it is, if I, for example, felt really called to explore the more masculine serpent group that you were talking about.
Mhm. My advice would be everything starts with exactly with relationship building. So the person who's interested in weaving, I would ask them, have you begun a journey of devotional practices with a goddess like Mokosha? That would be my first suggestion would be have a relationship with the holy power in question. So for you, interested in the male South Slavic, the dragon men, as they're called, who work with literal snakes, and we know that these are dimly remembered echoes of wider serpent based cultic activity surrounding the god Veles. I'm a devotee of Veles, so it's not to say that, well, you can only be of this, you know, set of specific genitalia and a gender identity to work with this deity. That's not true. So build the relationship with those wider powers first and foremost. Ask for their counsel in your dreams. Look at some of the offerings that I suggest in my book and have a little home altar, however simple it may be. Get your dynamic established, and then when it comes to exploring partnerships in the human world, maybe you have an elderly neighbor who's a Slavic immigrant and she's all alone, or you're volunteering at a nursing home and you come across such an individual and you see her, on her own, embroidering, doing whatever. Establish the relationship that way. You can be as flamboyantly gay as you want. My best friend, who is, and
Mm-hmm.
he's never been turned away. I've brought him to church with me. He's been in Serbian Orthodox service multiple times. No one ever said, hey, you don't belong here. Everyone is welcome. And I think that just like with if you were traveling in Europe, and I know you have been, and you're in a foreign country, just making the attempt to learn that language,
Mm-hmm.
making the attempt to meet people where they are goes such a long way. You will be received hospitably, and your efforts to reach out to them on their terms will be commended. So I think a lot of instances, yes, the demographics it's an aging population. There's not enough babies being born in Eastern European countries, and they're aware that the elders are going off en masse. They're leaving this earth en masse. Who is going to now inherit the mantle of these traditions? In my pagan networking at a conference I go to, I'm going to be at Paganicon in Minneapolis next month, and I'm
Awesome.
doing a Slava based spring equinox Mother Earth ritual there. But through my networking with the people I only see when I'm there once a year, I know
Mhm.
of a gentleman who lives in Florida. He's of African American descent, but he is training with like those male magicians I'm talking about in
Mm.
Serbia and Bosnia because they're like, we're dying out. And you're a Black man from America, and we're happy to teach you what we know because we don't want our knowledge to die out. So
Yeah.
that all begins with dialogue, really dialogue, just heart-centered dialogue. I talk about my polytheistic practices with these and many other gods that I serve. It's a form of Hinduism known as bhakti yoga. It's the yoga of the heart. You are flexing your heart chakra muscles in
Yes.
simple daily devotion to your gods, your ancestors, your spirits. And I'm flexing that heart chakra muscle when I'm interacting with people in my community or anyone. So, one of the fundamental precepts that I talk about in the book, and that's the base of my inclusive Slavic native faith tradition that I'm building, is that anyone of any background should feel empowered and confident to want to reach out to the gods and spirits that I talk about. We're a shrinking planet. We need to realize, just as with organic beings in nature, we have webs of interdependency. Nobody is separate from that. Nobody in the human community is separate from that either.
Nope.
I call it the circle of Rodu. Rodu is kinship, it's ancestry, but it's beyond that. It's like the Native American idea of being in harmony with all that is. That is
Mhm.
the totality of Rodu. The living and the dead, we're
Mhm.
united in that circle. Me and the animals, we're united in that circle. You and I, the people you meet in your theater work, everybody of every religion at all time, the levels of reality depicted in this iconography of the world tree that unites all things from its branches to its roots. That's that totality of the circle of Rodu, and there is no thing that is not of it. All
Yep.
space and time converges within it. We have these
Yeah.
access points to otherworldly magic at all times if we but had the eyes to see,
Indeed.
and that's what we need. But
Yeah.
it's just empowering and life affirming. And so for me, knowing, as you know for yourself, we're at the end of our family lines. But
Yep.
let's now expand the concept of what does family mean.
Yep.
That's my premise with doing this book and with living the way that I live and being the witch that I am today.
Yeah. And I love how synchronicities fall into place. In many ways, I feel like where this conversation spun to has already answered this question in the chat that has popped up, but I want to read it out in case there is a subtle specificity that you would like to address. Angela writes, my book hasn't arrived yet in Canada, but I wonder if you could speak to how someone without
Mhm.
Slavic ancestry can engage with the practices in your book. And I feel like you talked some about that with the African American gentleman in Florida, but I wonder if there's anything else that is coming up for Angela.
So again, it's going to start with the devotional practices you're doing in your own home as like the core of how you're going to expand into other communities. So I talk a lot about altar building. I talk a lot about your ancestors are going to be a primary means of your cultic focus at home. Get that ancestor altar going. But then I address potentially thorny issues of What if there's someone, in my family that passed away who was a toxic individual when they were alive? How do I
Yeah.
navigate that relationship? Do I want to after they've
Hmm.
passed? I address that in detail. I even
And you
include
addressed that so well, and I'm
something about
so
a
glad
cord.
you
Yes.
did.
Cut your cord. Thank you. Cut your cord to that
Hmm.
person if that's the healthiest option, to cut and clear them away from your life. Or, and this is very much top of mind with me because my mom, I buried her yesterday. Her funeral was yesterday after the exhaustive, 6 years spent in my identity as her caregiver. Um, this idea of just because somebody dies, ancestorhood is not automatically conferred upon them. In Serbian culture, we believe, and there's a parallel with Egyptian, which is fascinating. The first 40 days after her funeral, so after yesterday, they're the most spiritually hazardous for her because Mama's spirit has to work at ascending. And it's my job as her loved one and anyone else who wants to honor her memories, we've got to fortify her through prayer, through ritual, and for me, literally through leaving on her grave foods. Literally, it's symbolic fortification of her spirit. And in Kemetic belief, there's a book called the Amduat, the Book of Gates. It's from Old Kingdom, pre-dynastic Egypt. The soul has to navigate up and up and up, but at the end of each portal, there's a nasty spiritual entity that challenges the deceased soul on their journey, and traps can be set for the deceased soul on their journey. So my mom is not automatically an ancestor. I've got to work at elevating her. She will hopefully get to the elevated place and be with my brother and my father. And it took them years as well to be elevated to status of ancestorhood. It's not automatically conferred upon you just because you die. So I talk about ancestor elevation. So to the beginner, whatever your heritage, almost all cultures on earth have some way within their ethnic tradition of dealing with the dead, of praying to, not for, but to the dead, and asking them for your help while you're also elevating them on their journey. Ancestor work, which gods of the Slavic pantheon, and that is a problematic term for me in a lot of ways. Who appeals to you? Why? Explore these connections. Why does this work? I would tell that person in the chat, why does this appeal to you if this is not of your background? What does the concept of having an ethnically informed spiritual practice mean to you? Does that matter? Why or why not? So start probing, get the self-awareness going, put your thoughts out on paper, and then implement the devotional practices to your own dead and to the deities and spirits that I talk about in the book, and then see where that takes you. And then if you want guidance and fellowship, that's why I'm building the inclusive Slavic Native Faith Fellowship that I'm working on doing, both in person for folks in the greater Chicagoland area, but then of course online for people who may be wherever they are across the planet. So that's my aim with all of this.
Yeah, I loved joining Circle of Rodu, and I was completely surprised that I didn't know about it before. I was like, how did I miss this? But we we both lead full lives. I cannot believe that we are coming up on our last 7 minutes of this conversation. Um, I love being in space with you. I love being in ritual with you. I love talking about religion and spirituality
Likewise,
with you.
likewise, dear.
Like we didn't we I didn't get to talk to you about some of my like Croatian friends' names that in reading the book I was like
Mhm.
Vedrana,
Mhm.
Božena,
Uh-huh.
my great aunt's last name, Digidora. I'm like, these all have links
Yes,
to different
yes.
spirits. Like, um,
Boshana, literally, that hits me on the head. That means beloved by God. So everything has a root in something spiritual. And a lot of Slavic names, attest to our pagan heritage. You know, they're non-biblical. So a very popular boy's name in Serbia is Vuk. Vuk means wolf. Like, especially, and there's a lot of magic behind it. If a mother has a child, unfortunately, let's say it's a male child and it's sickly, to imbue that child with magical power, she may decide to name him Vuk in the hopes that he will grow strong and healthy and be a leader, just like that animal. So there's a lot of fun and fascinating stories behind names. Toponymy is the study of place names. So that's how we know across Slavic nations where certain deities, cults really thrived, because the place name of whatever country has the name of the god within it. You know, so we can see how widespread Velis's worship was, Perun's worship was, because it's literally embedded within the landscape and named after
Yeah.
the tower. Mm-hmm.
Which is another piece that I love so much about about Slava, is the invitation to really be where you are, to learn the stories and the cycles of the land that you are on right now,
Yes.
what it means, and having just passed Imbolc, and I celebrated Imbolc with the Druids out at Avebury.
Oh,
Very different celebrating Imbolc with the Druids at Avebury in the
oh,
UK than it is celebrating Imbolc with our reclaiming family in Portland. Like the place
mm-hmm.
matters.
Yes.
And I don't remember who it was that you quoted of, but I'm totally going to paraphrase, of if you are practicing an earth-based religion and yet you are holding to a fixed calendar date
Mm-hmm.
for a seasonal celebration,
Mm-hmm.
if that sense of the season, spring, summer, winter, hasn't actually landed
Yes.
on your land yet, then how are you actually listening to the earth? That is purportedly what you are wanting to do.
Yes.
And
I'm going to
I am,
interrupt you. That was, we're paraphrasing a quote from my friend and fellow Llewellyn author Keldon. They are an American tradcraft witch, and that is the sense of being very bio-regional specific with your work,
yeah.
because I'm looking where I'm at. We've been having roller coaster weather. It was spring like, now winter's back. You know, it's going to be unsettled like this for a while. But if I look at the date of spring equinox, but there's still ice coating the river where I live, I'm not going to do a spring equinox ritual until that river thaws and until the birds I associate with spring where I live, like the red-winged blackbird and all of my little American goldfinch friends, if they're not back in the yard yet, then spring hasn't happened where I live. So
Yeah.
again, make it specifically tailored to your landscape, your climate. But going back to what you said about being with Druids at Avebury, that's why the power of place matters, because when you're talking about specific spirits, you know, when I pray to Veles here, I have he's linked with like watery places are portals to the other world, just like in Celtic pre-Christian belief. Sacred wells, sacred springs, rivers, lakes, but especially swampland is associated with him. And I've always gravitated towards swamps. So I can go to an American swamp. I can go to the river outside in my backyard. I can do a guided visualization and meet him there in the underworld. But that pales in comparison, like you wouldn't believe, to if I'm in Serbia, if I'm at the base of Zlatibor Mountain, which I write about in my introduction, where I first felt his energies, being there, attuning to him there, praying to him in Serbian there, is a whole different ballgame, folks. So
Yeah.
I encourage people, if you do have any shred of Slavic heritage in you, take the time to learn just some words in your language. Take the time to craft an invocation in that language to your deity, to your ancestors. pray to them in their native tongue, give it a shot, and I guarantee you, you will feel such a richness of spirit. I
Yes.
guarantee you. It will be a coming home feeling, I promise you.
That is a perfect button. I will link all of the things, all of the ways to follow Anna, to purchase Slava if you haven't done so already. And you are presenting,
At
so
Paganicon, yes.
are tickets still available or is it
Yes,
sold out?
registration. It's there's the tiered pricing, so of
Yeah.
course we're way past the early bird stuff now. Tickets are still available. I believe for the juried art show, they've closed submissions for that. Workshops have all been spoken for, but if you want to attend, and even if you just want to go as a member of the general public into the room and support the amazing vendors, readers, energy workers, that's open to the public. You don't have to participate in the conference, but of course come for the conference. I think it's the best thing going on in the Midwest. Again, I look forward to seeing people from not just around the country, but around the world. We converge in Minneapolis. And now we have this even more sacred mantle of responsibility to offset all of the social injustice that has targeted Minneapolis in recent weeks. So I feel like an even greater call to be there, to show solidarity as a Chicagoan who's experienced the brutality of what in person. Now we're going to show even more solidarity in Minneapolis at I think it's the Doubletree Hotel in Bloomington, right outside Minneapolis International Airport. Very convenient. There'll be free shuttle buses. So Paganicon 2026. Get your tickets and book your hotel room, and it's going to be an amazing time.
Yeah. Anna.
Kate, I know you are just there's such a light, there's such a warmth. I just have so much love and just such pride in seeing how you have, because I've known you since you were, late teens, early 20s. Seeing you grow into this amazing person before me is just ah. I just have all the auntie vibes for you. I feel like I'm your aunt.
Yeah,
I'm
you
your
and
Tesla. I'm your
I
Tesla
will
auntie.
I will say thank you very much and know that I am very much who I am because of you.
Oh,
So thank you.
oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah.
Cry, you're making me cry. Thank you.
Well, if you want to talk more, again, I'm figuring out what this channel is going to turn into next because it is going to be so much more than just talking tarot because we didn't even get into
Oh.
the card divinations
Yeah.
that you talk about. So maybe we have another conversation
Well, if
going
you
down.
ever come across a deck you like, the Nine of Pentacles is my favorite card. I associate that with me and where I am at this stage in my life. So think of me when you see the Nine of Pentacles come up in a reading.
Do you know which card I associate with myself?
Queen of Wands or the Star? Those are my
The Eight
guesses.
of Pentacles.
Oh, yes, work.
So, and especially given like how close but just a little far away our ages are, like that's kind of lovely and hilarious.
I think it's beautiful. Nothing is by
I
accident. No,
nothing.
you're part of
It
my soul family, and I cherish you for that. You are in the family of my soul.
likewise, my
From
friend.
one last unicorn to another. Absolutely. Yes, little horn. Little horn.
It's going to be one of those long goodbyes because I don't
I
actually
know. I
want this
know.
conversation to end.
Well, then
But
maybe we'll say see you later because knock on wood, depending on how things fall out in my post Paganicon state and I assess what I can budget for.
mhm.
I would love to make another trip to Serbia happen, but before that, I definitely want to see you in London town. So from our
I would.
to the gods' ears. I speak this into
Indeed.
being.
I would turn the camera to show you the bed that you would sleep on, but I am doing laundry right now. And because I am in the UK, there is no dryer. So the sheets
Mhm.
and things are just like willy-nilly. But trust that right there is
Oh,
all ready for you.
I can't wait. And Aquarius and Treadwell's bookstore, here we come.
Absolutely. I actually did ask Treadwell's if they had your book in stock yet or on order, and because yes, I hope that you are able to come and do an author talk there
Oh my
and
gosh.
be hosted by me.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that would be all kinds of dreams come true. Yes,
We
we'll
speak it that it
manifest.
may be.
Yes, yes, yes. So mote it be. I
So
love you.
mote it be. Love you, Anna. Mwah.
Have a good rest of your day.